pivotal election year. Colorado is right in the middle of the action. Colorado Republicans see the U.S. Senate race between Democratic Senator Michael Bennet and GOP challenger Joe O'Dea as their best shot to begin a comeback from their most powerless point in state politics since before World War II. The race has national implications, with the Senate narrowly divided. Senator Bennet is running on his 13-year record in the Senate, and he's not shying away from his close ties to President Biden and their large spending programs. O'Dea promises an outsider's perspective as a businessman. O'Dea has said he wants someone other than Donald Trump to be the leader of the Republican Party, but he said he'd vote for Trump a third time if Trump is the 2024 nominee. Bennet and O'Dea have strong disagreements on the economy, abortion, immigration, and the role of government in our lives. Tonight, their only debate being televised statewide. Live from Colorado State University in Fort Collins, this is 9 News Presents The Race for Senate. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the Laurie Student Center on the campus of Colorado State University in Fort Collins. I'm Kyle Clark alongside Marshall Zellinger, and our fellow moderators for this evening's debate are Luigi Del Puerto from Colorado Politics and Heather Skold from KRDO in Colorado Springs. Our audience this evening has agreed to refrain from interruptions or applause, with one exception, which is when we introduce Democratic Senator Michael Bennet and Republican Joe O'Dea.
And that's it. Thank you. A note for our folks at home and the people watching behind me here, except for that introduction, we do not refer to our candidates here by any elected titles or educational titles as we do in all of our debates. You, as voters, will determine who will have the title as U.S. Senator on Election Day. Candidates, you've agreed to a few ground rules. 1-minute answers to most of our questions, continued discussion at our discretion, 2-minute closing statements, and a chance to ask each other some questions as we continue to figure out where you guys agree and disagree.
So let's get started on the issue of inflation. And KRDO's Heather Skold has that first question.
The 10 counties in Colorado experiencing persistent poverty are in the southern part of our state. They include the counties of Bent, Castilla, Rio Grande, Conejos, Otero, Prowers, Saguache, Alamosa, Crowley, and Fremont. That's where the median household income is less than $38,000. Food pantries are reporting unprecedented demand, with food prices that are largely reliant on fertilizer and fuel. How do we reverse inflation for those who cannot make ends meet? Mr. O'Dea, we start with you.
Well, thanks for having me here tonight. It starts with the reckless spending that we've seen by Bennet and Biden over the course of the last 2 years. $1.9 trillion dumped into the market with a rescue plan. Michael Bennet, he doesn't get any results. He dumped $1.9 trillion into our economy that's caused record inflation. Compound that with a war on energy fully backed by Michael Bennet, Joe Biden, that's caused record inflation on gas and diesel prices, directly reflected in the fertilizer price that's caused this record inflation. Until we end the war on diesel, the frivolous spending, and the government intervention. They don't talk about all the red tape that's been put on our economy. That's got to stop. We need that to stop to get in front of this record inflation.
And Mr. Bennet.
Thank you, Heather. The families that you're talking about in the San Luis Valley and on the eastern plains of Colorado and the counties that you listed are among the poorest, live among the poorest counties in our state. And I have been fighting very hard since the time I got to Washington to try to move away from the trickle-down economics that Joe O'Dea supports so strongly, and instead try to do something for working people who have been living in an economy for 50 years, even before this inflation, where they felt like they couldn't get their families moving ahead. So my child tax credit, for example, last year would have meant that every one of those families would be receiving $450 a month right now to pay for groceries, to pay for the rent, to be able to buy school clothes for their kids. That's the difference between me and Joe O'Dea. I'm fighting for that. That's why I want to go back to make that tax credit permanent. He wants to make the tax cuts for that Donald Trump passed for the wealthiest people in America permanent.
Mr. Bennet, you voted for President Biden's so-called Inflation Reduction Act. That plan is aimed at reducing carbon emissions by 40% by 2030, expanding the clean energy economy, and lowering health care costs. The Inflation Reduction Act will not, according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, reduce inflation in any meaningful way. Did Democrats mislead Americans by calling it that? And do you have any concerns that the plan's spending will actually make inflation worse?
I don't think we misled the American people, and I don't think the spending is going to make it worse. Unlike the Trump tax cuts, this bill was actually paid for, and it would cap drug prices for seniors at $2,000 in Colorado. It would require Medicare for the first time in American history to negotiate drug prices on behalf of the American people, and it caps insulin at $35 a month. Joe O'Dea says there's nothing to like in that bill. I think there are a lot of Coloradans, especially seniors, that are going to find a lot to like in this bill. We are the only country in the world, Kyle, where seniors have to spend their retirement engaged in a fight just to pay for prescription drugs that a doctor has prescribed for them. And I've met them all over the state, people that are cutting their pills in half, that are choosing between food and medicine. And finally, we overcame the pharmaceutical industry to pass that bill. Joe O'Dea says if he had been there, he would have voted against it.
Mr. Bennet, you focused a lot of that answer of the Inflation Reduction Act on prescription drug prices covered by Medicare. That's about 1 in 10 Coloradans. More than half of Coloradans are covered by private insurance, not Medicare. So perhaps this is a selfish question, but where's the help for people not on Medicare?
Well, I think that we should pass my Medicare X bill with Vice President Biden that would give every American and every Coloradan the chance to choose whether they wanted to stay on their private insurance or go on a public option administered by Medicare. In rural parts of our state, especially where there is no competition among the private health care providers and rates continue to rise, I think it's very important for us to have that public option. It gives people choice. It gives people the efficiencies of something administered by Medicare, and I think it's a way in which we could finally cover everybody in this country. And that would also reduce costs because then people wouldn't have to go to the emergency room for their primary care. They could get their primary care on the front end and benefit from that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Bennet.
Mr. O'Dea, you said on talk radio that there is going to be a reduction in benefit programs like Social Security and Medicare. You have said that Senator Bennett's spending on government programs has created dependency. Yet you've said that the construction spending, the government spending that you benefited from, like those construction contracts that helped you build your personal wealth, are opportunity. So here's the question. Why is government spending that benefits you opportunity and government spending that benefits other Coloradans dependency?
Well, Kyle, that's not what I said. What I said was I will not touch Social Security or Medicare, Medicaid. What I said is that Michael Bennett's reckless spending with Joe Biden has put those types of programs at risk. We've got to quit the frivolous spending. We've got to reduce the size of our government. We've got to make sure that our government functions efficiently. When you grow a bureaucracy like the Inflation Reduction Act does, and you put $80 billion behind 87,000 IRS bureaucrats to come shake down working Americans, you're not making our economy function better. That's where I've been. We need to take on this reckless spending. Michael Bennet doesn't get it done. He gets no results. One bill in 13 years that he's been president, the only thing he's been consistent on is voting with his president 98% of the time.
So to be clear, you'll have an opportunity here, but I want to make sure that we're clear on this. You're saying that we need to reduce the size of government but not touch Social Security and Medicare.
I've been saying that all along.
Okay.
That's exactly what I've said.
If I could ask you to answer my question. Why is government spending that benefits you and your personal fortune, why is that opportunity, but government spending that helps other people, you call that dependency?
When we pay people to sit on the couch at home, that's dependency. When we pay people to invest in our transportation system, in our water storage systems, in our economy, in our energy, those are assets that we're growing. I don't want to leave my house with a leaking roof to the kids. We need to invest in America. You put people to work, and they benefit from that.
U.S. to respond.
Well, first I'd say I think it's so insulting to Coloradans when Joe says Coloradans need to get off the couch. That's what he says. That's what he said tonight. He said it before, and it's insulting. People in this economy, with this inflation, are killing themselves. And even before it, they were killing themselves to afford housing and health care and higher education and early childhood education. The problem is not that people need to get off the couch in Colorado. And I think, I'll say again, I can't think of a more egregious deficit spending than the Trump tax cuts, 50% of which went to the top 5%. At a time when our income inequality is as bad as it's been since the 1920s. And that's what he wants to go back to Washington to make permanent. That's not going to make working people's lives better. We should pass my 2 tax cuts that are the biggest tax cuts that working families have had in generations. We passed them last year.
Mr. O'Day, would you like to be heard on the issue of government spending and inflation before we move on to other topics?
Let's clear this up. First off, you just voted for an Inflation Reduction Act that even Bernie Sanders says doesn't reduce inflation whatsoever. In addition to that, it grows a bureaucracy by 87,000, 40,000 people, whatever you want to call it. It's $80 billion. That's going to shake down working Americans. That's a tax. You're taxing working Americans. When the Joint Committee on Taxation, a nonpartisan committee, says that it's going to, 75% of these audits are going to go after working Americans making less than $100 grand a year, that's a tax.
15 seconds.
2 things. One, he said again, and he's got an ad up lying about this. He said, I've only passed 1 bill since I've been there. That's completely untrue. This has been fact-checked. I've written 101 bills that have passed. 82 of those were the Republican co-sponsor, and that's just the ones that I've written, not the ones that I've co-sponsored or the ones that I've worked on. Second, the taxes in this bill, the alternative minimum corporate tax that says, you know what, maybe after all, corporations should have to pay at least 15% when teachers and firefighters and police officers in Colorado have to pay a much higher than that as a percentage. That's what he calls a tax on working people. Working people in Colorado are not Fortune 100 companies.
Thank you, Senator Bennet.
Kyle, you did the interview. It's 1 bill in 13 years that became law.
One standalone bill that was not rolled into other larger packages of which he was the prime sponsor. And as he acknowledged, he wrote the other bills.
The only thing he's been consistent
on
is voting for Joe Biden 98% of the time. That's where you've been consistent.
Could I respond to that? You said you wanted us to talk.
Go ahead.
He keeps saying this, that I vote with Joe Biden 98% of the time. The votes that I have taken, the bills that I have supported, from the bipartisan infrastructure bill to the bipartisan postal reform bill to the bipartisan gun bill, which he opposes and Mitch McConnell voted for, the bipartisan veterans bill that's the most significant expansion in veterans benefits in a generation, the semiconductor bill to bring back an industry for the first time since Reagan was our president and outsourced everything. And yeah, the Inflation Reduction Act, all of those are popular in Colorado. His position on guns, unpopular in Colorado.
We will talk about guns. Thank you, Senator.
His position not to cap drug prices for seniors, unpopular in Colorado.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
$5 trillion in spending. $5 trillion.
We're going to move on to some other topics. Luigi Del Puerto from Colorado Politics has our next question.
Thank you, Kyle. The fentanyl crisis is spiraling out of control, and this pernicious poison is killing our children. In the last year, some 73,000 people have died from synthetic opioid-related overdoses in the United States, according to the CDC. And one study found that in 2021, fentanyl was identified in nearly 80% of adolescent overdose deaths. In Colorado, 462 people have died from January to August of this year alone. One of the children who died is Josiah Joe Velasquez. He was only 15 years old. His mother, Christina, said if she could exchange her life for his, she would do it in a heartbeat. Mr. Bennet, if Joe's mother were here tonight to ask you, what concrete steps would you take if returned to Congress so that no other mother would have to lose her son?
First of all, I'd say how devastated I know she must be, and there are families all over Colorado who have suffered the way Josiah's family is suffering, and we all know people that have suffered as a result of this poison, as you call it, and it is poison. I think we have to push back much harder on China to prevent China from sending these precursor chemicals to Mexico. We have to push much harder on Mexico to make sure that they will actually do something about the gangs in northeastern Mexico that are producing this poison. We need to make sure that we strengthen our border and support law enforcement. And it's very important for us as well to have, for people, I'm not talking about Josiah, who's 15 years old, I don't know his circumstances, but for people that are afflicted by opioid addictions in this state, we need to make sure that they have the chance as they're going through the criminal justice system to get better, to get well. We're not doing that well as a country right now.
Mr. O'Day, the same question, sir.
Well, Michael Bennett's been in the Senate for 13 years and had every opportunity to secure this border. It's still not secure. When I talk to the cops up here, Chief Pazin, Sheriff Schrader with Jefferson County, they're doing all they can for fentanyl overdose here in town. They need help with securing the border. When I went down there this last week, they're asking for a wall. You know why? Because they're exhausted. They want us to close and secure this border. That's where the fentanyl is coming from. It's coming straight up I-25. They want the barrier so that they can drive people through the access points. This has got to get solved. My first bill that I will run will be directed at securing this border, giving the DACA kids their just so they have citizenship, and reinvigorating our immigration system. We need to revamp the entire system. It doesn't work. We've got guys that have been working here 5 years. They can't get through our system. It's got to stop.
Yeah.
Mr. Bennet, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Luigi. Look, he says I've had every opportunity to secure the border in the time that I've been in the Senate. In 2013, we wrote and passed a bill called the Gang of Eight bill. I was one of the 4 Democrats who wrote that bill. And it had $40 billion of border security in it. But it wasn't Trump's medieval wall that Joe has supported so strongly in this campaign, and when he voted for Donald Trump twice, and when Donald Trump was running for president, saying Mexicans are rapists, making it impossible for us to get anything done on immigration, and we've got to fix it. And the Gang of Eight bill, which passed with 68 votes in the Senate, is still our best chance to do it, and it's one of the reasons that, you know, I desperately want to go back. I didn't vote for a president who made it impossible for us to get anything done in immigration. Joe O'Day voted for that president twice.
Mr. O'Day, just really quickly, do you want to respond, sir?
A lot of talking. We're hearing a lot of talking. You've been doing talking for 13 years, and you haven't got it done. Michael Bennet doesn't deliver results. What he does is vote with Joe Biden 98% of the time, and the result is an economy that's trashed. We've got a border that's still wide open. It hasn't been solved. You know what's medieval? What's medieval is allowing fentanyl to kill our kids. That's medieval.
Thank you, Mr. O'Day. We've partnered in this debate with CLADO, the Colorado Latino Leadership Advocacy and Research Organization, to better spotlight particular concerns of Colorado's Latino communities. And Marshall Zellinger has that next question.
We're going to go through some stats here. Recent polling by the Colorado Latino Policy Agenda found 83% of the Latinos surveyed are concerned their child could be the victim of a mass shooting. The survey found strong support for a series of gun control measures. I'm going to ask you each a yes or no question. Then you'll have a minute at the end to discuss your overall philosophy on gun rights and gun control. So yes or no questions here. 85% of Colorado Latinos surveyed would support universal background checks for all firearm sales, as Colorado already has. Mr. Bennet, do you support that at the federal level?
Yes.
Mr. O'Day?
I do.
75% of Colorado Latinos surveyed would support increasing the legal age to purchase a so-called assault weapon from 18 to 21. 18 is currently the law in Colorado. Mr. O'Day, would you support a federal law requiring purchasers of so-called assault rifles to be 21?
I would not. No more laws.
Mr. Bennet?
Yes.
75% of Colorado Latinos surveyed would support a 10-day waiting period to purchase a firearm. Colorado does not have a waiting period. Mr. Bennet, would you support that federal 10-day waiting period to buy a gun?
No.
Mr. O'Day?
No.
One more here. 66% of Colorado Latinos surveyed would support a ban on the sale of so-called assault rifles. 8 states and the District of Columbia, where you want to go work, have some form of assault weapon bans, but not Colorado. Mr. O'Day, would you support a federal ban on the sale of so-called assault weapons?
I do not.
Mr. Bennet?
I think we've made enough of these weapons of war in this country.
Now we can elaborate a little bit on this. I'm going to give you a minute to talk about more of your broader thoughts on gun rights and gun control, starting with Mr. O'Day.
Look, We've got plenty of laws on the books. Every time we turn around and have an event, we put another law on the book. We need to enforce the laws that are on the books now. And I will not be lectured by Democrats that continue to say we need to change this gun law, change that gun law, when they fail to enforce the laws that we already have on the books. If you're a drug dealer and you possess a weapon, you don't get charged with a felony here in Colorado. That's ridiculous to me. We also need to get behind our cops. We need more cops in our society. We need more cops in our community. And I believe that we should have cops in our school systems. They love to talk to the kids. They're a great influence on our kids. If we want to safe up our society, we need more cops. I would be an advocate for taking the $80 billion that we're going to use to shake down working Americans with the IRS and investing that in our local cops.
I have just a couple quick follow-ups. I'm trying to figure out which one to go to first. You mentioned a few Colorado laws, but you're running for federal office. So if school districts are responsible for the cost of having officers in schools, should that be Congress funding that?
Well, I told you, I believe that if we need that at the federal level, I would back a plan to put more cops in our schools. I think it's that important.
So that's more spending. One other thing that you just mentioned, I'm drawing a blank all of a sudden. It was, toward the end, the $87,000 for the IRS agents. $80 billion for 87,000 IRS agents. Why would that be not okay, but you're saying that we need to enforce the laws in terms of law enforcement and guns? Wouldn't those positions be enforcing the current tax laws? Why is one okay and the other is not?
Look, when we're taxing working Americans that are making less than $100,000 a year and shaking them down, that's not going to be on the upper 1%. That's going to be on working Americans making less than 100 grand. That's just a shakedown. We need to put that money into something that would benefit our society, which right now, with a 30% escalation in crime across the United States, that would be a good use of our money.
Thank you, Mr. O'Day. Mr. Bennet?
I hate to use any of my time correcting the record here on the IRS agents because it's been fact-checked over and over and over again, and what he's saying is false. You know, this takes the IRS back to where it was in 2010. The IRS, my constituents in this state who want to get tax credits back from the U.S. government, 1 out of 10 gets their phone answered at the IRS. The software is from the 1960s. And it's been made clear by the administration that nobody who's making less than $400,000 is going to hear from the IRS because of this money.
Well, that's not true.
If you do hear, could I finish my answer? If you do hear from the IRS, I want to hear about it in my office in Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, people like Joe O'Day are getting away, the richest people in America are getting away with murder. They're not paying their taxes. They're never audited. And it's a huge distinction between where he is and where I am. On guns, I just want it to be very clear. Joe O'Day said he supports no gun laws beyond what we already have as a society. He's against the red flag law we have in Colorado. And he said that he would have voted against the bipartisan gun bill that is the first time in generations that Republicans and Democrats have overcome
Mr. Bennet, you chose to
together.
talk about the IRS instead of guns. Red flag law, is that true, what he said?
Look, let's clear this up. Mike Crapo ran an amendment that would have prevented any audits under $400,000 a year, and you and your Democratic Party voted against it. You're making it clear you're shaking down working Americans making less than 100
Thank you,
grand.
Mr. O'Day.
That was a show amendment. He didn't answer your question, obviously, about the red flag law.
Thank you both.
Heather has our next question.
Mr. Bennet, we'll start with you.
Thanks.
You support Colorado's abortion on demand law, which allows abortions up to birth and goes far beyond what polls show the majority of Americans believe should be legal. Would you like to see a national standard like Colorado's, or should individual states be able to restrict abortion to certain points, and why?
Colorado has rejected abortion bans over and over again, and only 1% of the abortions in our state and in this country are late-term abortions. And they're the worst circumstances a mother could have. These are circumstances where she's carried the baby to term. She's picked out a room for the child. She's named the child. She's expecting the child to be there. And for medically horrific reasons, she's having to have an abortion. That's 1%. And I don't think Joe O'Day should be in that hospital room with her when she's got to make that decision. I don't think any politician should. I trust Colorado's mothers and women. I trust America's mothers and women. I think the idea that he has said that he wants to bring balance to women's rights in Washington, the idea that he said he doesn't want abortion on demand or abortion to be an elective procedure, that does not reflect the reality of women having the worst experience of their life.
Your time is up.
The last thing they need
Thank
is
you.
for Joe O'Dea.
Mr. O'Dea,
in
you
that
signed a petition. We will address that. You signed a petition to get a 22-week abortion ban on the ballot in Colorado and voted for it. The only exception would have been the life of the mother. You now say you would support a ban on abortion after 20 weeks, with exceptions for rape and incest, in addition to the health of the mother. You said you wanted to go to the Senate to, quote unquote, bring balance to women's rights. What exactly did you mean by that statement?
Well, I've been consistent. I can't vote for late-term abortion. I believe women's health rights are paramount. I would support a woman's right to choose up to and including 5 months. That decision should be between her and her mother. After that, for the exceptions of rape, incest, life of the mother, medical exception, that too should be between a woman and her doctor, that decision. Michael Bennet, on the other hand, he has voted for abortion up to and including the moment of birth, and he wants to use taxpayer funding to pay for it. To me, that's extreme.
Mr. Bennet.
Could I just mention one other thing?
15 seconds to close it up.
This is another place where my position is aligned with Colorado's position, and Joe O'Dea's position is completely unaligned with Colorado.
You made that point at the beginning. Mr. Bennet, your opponent has described you as a rubber stamp for President Biden, and you've said that's not true. So could you provide voters tonight with an example of when you believe President Biden has made a serious mistake and how you have gone about opposing that serious mistake?
Sure. I think he made a serious mistake going to Saudi Arabia, and I said before he went there that he shouldn't go to Saudi Arabia. I think he made a serious mistake lifting Title 42, and I said before he did it that he shouldn't do it. I think he made a mistake when he almost killed Colorado's solar industry, and I led the fight to save Colorado's solar industry. Those are just some examples of where we've disagreed, and I'm sure we'll continue to have our disagreements.
Mr. Bennet, thank you. Actually, you know what? A quick follow-up here. You told me a couple of weeks ago that you have no concerns about President Biden's mental and physical ability to do the job for another 6 years if he wants to run for election in 2024. President Biden will be 80 in a couple of months, and there are Democrats who are openly concerned about his health. If you did develop concerns about Biden's mental or physical fitness, would you say something publicly?
Absolutely, yes.
You would. Okay, thank you. Mr. O'Dea, you have said that you'll buck your party. You've said that you'll be the Republican Joe Manchin of the Senate. You certainly disagree with Republican leader Mitch McConnell on some issues. There are also issues that McConnell has not shown a real appetite in bringing up for votes, like abortion and gay marriage. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, he's become this powerful centrist in the Senate because he bucks his party on their big-time priorities. So my question for you, which of Mitch McConnell's big-time priorities are you ready to block?
Well, I've said all along that I believe Obamacare, the pieces that are left, should be left in place right now. My employees want pre-existing conditions as part of an insurance program going forward. You know, I don't know what's going to come up in the U.S. Senate, but what I do know is that I'm going to be Colorado's senator. I'm not going to be a rubber stamp for Joe Biden 98% of the time. I'm going to make sure that whatever we put through the U.S. Senate is going to be good for Colorado. And that's what we're missing right now. We've got a guy that likes to talk about things, doesn't get results, one bill, 13 years. That's not a track record that I'd be proud of.
I don't know what to say, except that is a lie. It has been fact-checked over and over again.
We've already covered this.
I know it's the third time, but he keeps repeating it.
Google it.
We'll state it one more time. There's one standalone bill that didn't get rolled into other legislation, as most legislation in Congress is rolled into other things, of which you were the prime sponsor, and your name's been on a million things while you've been there for the 13 years. I think we've kind of hashed that out.
A billion things since I've been there. Today, there's $18 million that's going to some of the counties that you talked about today to build broadband, thank God, in rural Colorado because of the bills that he's
Thank you,
opposed
Mr. Bennet.
Thank you.
I've got a question, quick follow-up question for Mr. O'Dea here on the idea of party allegiance, which is what we're talking about. You've said quite prominently that you will campaign for President Trump's rivals if he seeks the 2024 Republican nomination. That prompted former President Trump to insult you as a Republican in name only. And Trump said, quote, MAGA doesn't vote for stupid people with big mouths. Plenty of Republicans who have gotten worse insults from President Trump still fell in line and voted for him when he was the 2020 Republican nominee. Do you stand by what you've said previously, that you'll still vote for Trump if he's the 2024 Republican nominee?
I said what I said. I'm a contractor, not a politician.
Good enough. It was a yes or no
his-
question,
he
and you
can
answered it.
have
I
his-
appreciate that.
He
Thank
can
you.
have his vote.
This is usually my favorite part of the debate, where I get to hand things over to you. I don't feel like I need to say questions end in question marks, but let's just say I said it. This is where you get to ask each other a question mark. Mr. Bennet, you have a question for Mr. O'Day.
Well, I wasn't actually going to ask this question, but since Joe just said what he said, you know, he voted for Donald Trump twice after the children were separated from their parents at the border, after President Trump said that there were both sides, there were good people on both sides of Charlottesville. 30,000 lies.
Question, not filibuster.
Covering up for the Saudis when Khashoggi was killed, a journalist living here in America. Blew massive holes in the deficit to give rich people tax cuts.
Mr. Bennet, do you have a
3
question?
weeks before the general election in Colorado, Joe, you changed your mind and you said you're going to work against him. I just wonder what changed. If all that other stuff didn't affect the way you felt about Donald Trump, what changed during this general election 3 weeks ago for you to come out and say that?
Well, I started thinking about Joe Biden serving another 4 years and you serving another 6 years, and I got to tell you, it's terrifying. Our economy can't take another 6 years of a rubber stamp for a spender that just blesses everything that comes across his desk, spends money hand over fist.
Right.
That's terrifying to me. Our economy can't take that. Working Americans here need a voice. I'll be the voice of reason that says, you know what, we need to be disciplined. We need to do what's right for Colorado instead of just hanging with my party 98% of the time. That's the problem. We can't take any more of these Democratic policies that have led to record inflation, record crime, record price on gas, record price on diesel. That's what we're faced with. We can't have that happen again.
Mr. O'Day, I'm going to challenge this discipline that you just talked about. A short, not filibustered question for Mr. Bennet.
Well, I would ask Mr. Bennet, we've seen $5 trillion go into the market here in the last 2 years. And some Democrats have said they regret all of this spending. Do you regret this spending?
I regret the fact that we're facing the inflation that we're facing because the economy recovered at once globally. And we're having to deal with the effects of that because of the broken supply chains all over the world and because of the cost of energy that we're having to deal with. You know, Joe, you haven't been talking about it so much.
Well, I asked a question. Do you regret the spending?
And my answer to your question is I regret the inflation that people are facing.
That your spending caused?
Because of the broken supply chains globally and because of the energy that we're facing. You've been crying over and over again about the condition of the oil and gas industry. You started off the debate saying that today. This week we learned that they've got record profits at Exxon, record profits at Shell. And they're using those record profits not to help consumers here in Colorado pay at the pump, not to help on diesel, but to buy back stock, to do financial engineering. You should join me. I have a bill that would say they have to pay a windfall tax.
Thank you, Mr.
So
Bennet.
you don't regret the spending?
Gentlemen, we may have a chance to come back to this depending on how much time's
Okay.
left.
Mr. O'Day, you have made a serious allegation that the world's second largest tech company is interfering in this election to defeat you and to elect your opponent. You've said that Google has pulled your ads to support Senator Bennet. You've provided zero evidence that that's true. Our investigation of your publicly available Google Ads library also found zero evidence that's true, yet you continue to claim it in ads running today. You've made this allegation about a company that you would be in a position to regulate if you go to Congress. So tonight, what is your specific evidence that Google has pulled your ads to interfere in this election?
Kyle, they stopped my ads on abortion and how it was Googled for 2 weeks during our campaign. I stand by my decision. That's exactly what took place. You can go do your investigation. I find it kind of interesting that Senator Bennet can spend $30 billion, he and the PACs, trashing Joe O'Dea, trashing my business, all lies, while all I've been doing is talking about your record, and your record is terrible.
Mr.
You've
O'Dea,
got no
would you like to
results.
provide any evidence? You've provided
I'm
no
not
evidence.
going to do it here tonight. I'm not debating you. I'm debating Michael Bennet.
Well, I'm asking you if you're
I
interested in
told
backing
you,
up this
you can
allegation.
go look it up. It happened 2 weeks. They downed our Google effort so they couldn't search for our stuff. It's documented.
It actually, it is not, because these things are public, and we looked again this morning, and you have run Google ads without a single day of interruption since April 14th.
That's not true. That's just not true.
The public can go and they can look
They
on
can
the
go look.
Google
That's
Ad
just not true.
Transparency
That's just
portal,
not true.
and they can see that you've run ads every single day without interruption. There was a single ad pulled in June for an unspecified
single ad.
violation,
They pulled-
which your campaign will not tell us what that was for or if you attempted to fix it. So just one last question. Serious allegation about a behemoth company that you could regulate as a U.S. Senator. Do you have any evidence?
I just told you, they pulled one of our ads for 2 weeks. That's the evidence we
With
got.
respect, your word is not evidence, sir. Do you have any evidence?
It's there. You can find it.
Very good. Mr. Bennet, in 2019, you said that canceling student loan debt was a bad mistake. You called it regressive. You said it was unfair to people who just paid off their student loan debt. When President Biden went ahead and did that recently, you said that he should have further targeted the relief. But you didn't come out and oppose the decision to cancel that student loan debt. Was the president right to forgive that student loan debt?
I don't think he should have done it the way he did it, and I said that before, and I said it after. You know, I think that they did make it more targeted than they were originally, but it wasn't nearly what I thought they should do, which was do it for the people that need it the most, the poorest people in our country that have that debt, and not go above median family income for doing it, because I just think it's wrong for them to do it that way. So that's another place where I disagreed with the president. We can add that to the list from before.
So we shall, Mr. Bennett. Thank you.
I just want to add.
Would you like to be heard on student loan debt?
I have 30 seconds left, Kyle, on that answer.
Oh, I thought you were done. Go
No,
ahead.
I wasn't
take
done.
your time.
I wasn't done.
Take your time.
Just like he can't be trusted on Google, what he just said to you. He can't be trusted on what he is saying about a woman's right to choose. He says he's been clear from the very beginning. He's never been clear. He's been completely incoherent or not telling the truth about his position. And I think it's important that people that are running for office in this state say the same thing in a primary and the same thing in a general election. And he hasn't done that with a lot of the things that we're talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Mr. O'Dea, did you want to be heard on the issue of
I
student
did.
loan debt, or we'll move on to another question?
You've
Go
been
ahead.
on both directions on this student loan debt, retirement, transfer. I got to tell you, the guys that work for me, working Americans, they don't want to pay somebody else's tuition. They don't. And I would challenge you, will you run a bill? Congress has purse strings.
We're not
Will
doing
you
additional
run a bill?
questions right now,
Will
sir.
you run a bill to prevent that from happening?
Marshall has our next question.
Mr. O'Dea, you called for the defunding of tax law enforcement agents. You've said rather than hire new IRS agents to close the $381 billion a year gap between what the wealthiest Americans owe in taxes and what they pay, that the money should go to border security instead. Why not do both? Have the wealthiest Americans pay what they owe in taxes and use that money to fund border security. Then you have a lot more money for border security.
Well, it just seems interesting to me that that's not directed at the wealthiest Americans. If you're directing that at the wealthiest Americans, that's the upper 1%. You don't need 87,000 IRS agents to go after the upper 1%. What they're really doing is going after working Americans. These are nurses, these are doctors, these are lawyers, these are people that work in the restaurant business that have tips that have to report it. These are small businesses. These are painters. These are people that are trying to make a living. And the Democratic Party had every right to make sure that Mike Crapo's bill that would have prevented anybody from getting audited under $400,000, but Michael Bennet voted against that. He's ineffective. One bill, 13 years, no results. That's where we're at. We need we can do better here in Colorado.
The stat about 87,000 agents has been looked at, fact-checked, that it's getting people back.
Marshall, it's $80 billion. You do the math.
So, okay, let's just talk about the money, because we kind of glossed over that. But if you could have the money that people owe to then do some of the projects you'd like to see be done, what's wrong with that?
Well, I don't think they're going to get that money from working Americans. They're just not. And it's just going to make it more difficult for people that are trying to earn a living, working people. These are people that are barely making it right now. With the amount of spending that's gone on in the last 2 years, we have lost 10% of our buying power. We're hurting right now. Working Americans need a break.
Thank you, Mr. O'Day.
Luigi has our next question.
Thank you. Most polls show that a majority of Americans support a pathway to legal status or citizenship for undocumented immigrants who arrived in the United States as children. Congress has tried, as you both know, and failed numerous times to pass such legislation. Mr. O'Day, would you vote yes or no on a narrow legislation that provides a path to citizenship, to deferred action for childhood arrivals or DACA recipients, but which does not include any other immigration provision, such as beefing up the border? Again, yes or no, and then explain your answer, sir.
No, we need a comprehensive bill. We need one that safes up and secures the border, which includes putting up a barrier to give working sheriffs, Border Patrol a break down there. That's what they're asking us to do. In that same bill, I would support legislation that would include DACA recipients getting their citizenship. In addition to that, we need to streamline our immigration system. It needs to be predictable. As I said earlier, I have guys that have worked for me 15 years, and they've been on different visas, and they cannot get their citizenship. It's broken. We need to fix the whole thing at one time. That's how you get 60 signatures on a bill so it can actually pass the Senate. And then I will work hard to go over and talk to the Congress to make sure we can get it passed there. We need relief at the border.
Quick follow-up question, Mr. O'Day. Give us a number, any number, that if Congress allocates on an annual basis, you would believe, you believe would be sufficient to secure the border. I just need a number.
Well, right now, the number I've heard is $40 billion to get started, which would include 18,000 new Border Patrol and helping to complete that wall.
Mr. Bennet, some in your party insist that any legislation on this question must include a broader population than just the DACA recipients. If a narrow proposal is before you in the U.S. Senate that provides a path to citizenship to only DACA recipients, would you vote yes or no? Again, give me an answer, yes or no, and then explain your answer.
For DACA?
For DACA,
yes. Yes.
A standalone bill.
Yes. Yes.
Explain your answer, sir.
Yeah, and that puts me in a totally different place from where Joe O'Day is, who just said that he wouldn't vote against a standalone bill for DACA. There's bipartisan support for that. I hope we'll be able to get it done. With the immigration bill, in 2013, we had a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million people. We had the most progressive DREAM Act that had ever been written. We dealt with the visa issues that I know have been a huge pain point for Joe O'Day's business and for agriculture all over Colorado. And we had $40 billion of border security in it. But you know what? We weren't taxing people to pay for that border security. That was paid for by immigration fees as people were coming in to the economy. I think that'd be a lot better way of doing it. And we have to find a way to do it. Unfortunately, the president that Joe O'Day voted for twice after he called Mexicans rapists on the first day of his campaign made it impossible for the National Republican Party to move forward on immigration. I'm hoping that the economic consequences for this country have become so clear to them that they know we need labor here, that we're going to be able to get back to a bipartisan.
A quick follow-up question, Mr. Bennet. How much do you think it would cost to secure the border on an annual basis? Again, just give me a number.
I would say, I don't have it right here, I would say $40 billion in inflation-adjusted dollars from 2013 would cover it.
Thank you.
Heather has our next question.
The decision to move U.S. Space Command from Colorado Springs to Huntsville, Alabama could cost taxpayers billions of dollars and wipe out hundreds of millions of dollars from the local economy. A final decision on that is due to be released this fall, just as rogue nations are posing real threats to our national security. Mr. Bennet, what new tactics could you bring to the table to ensure Space Command stays in Colorado?
I think that we don't need new tactics. I think we need to continue to make the case that our national security depends on Space Command staying here, that Putin's invasion of Ukraine makes that even more clearly true. And we need to show the current administration how corrupt the Trump administration was when they made that horrible political decision to punish Colorado for the benefit of Alabama. And I believe in the end, our argument is so compelling on national security grounds that we're going to be able to get this over the finish line.
And what are those arguments?
Those arguments are that it's going to cost a gazillion dollars to move it to Alabama. Those arguments are that it's going to be stood up much more quickly here than in Alabama. Those arguments are that the people that work at Space Command, half of whom are civilians, don't want to move from Colorado to Alabama. And I can assure you they don't want to move to Alabama when Alabama's banned abortion and Colorado has codified a woman's right to choose.
So we've heard that from you. What are you doing to ensure that it stays? I haven't heard that.
I'm making that argument to every level of the White House, every level of the Department of Defense. I have led the congressional delegation in making this argument, and I think we will succeed.
Mr. O'Day, if you're elected into office, how would you fight to keep Space Command in Colorado?
Well, this is the difference between a contractor and a politician. When I'm in the U.S. Senate, I'm going to use my seat. I'm going to use my seat like Joe Manchin has used his seat to get good things for West Virginia. He may not have gotten his permits approved, but he got a pipeline into West Virginia. All Michael Bennet had to do was say, you know what, I'm going to hold up this appointment. I'm going to hold up this bill. I'm going to hold up that bill, because 50 is what the count is, and they needed every vote. And I would use my seat to make sure that we keep Space Command here in Colorado. It's that important. And instead of doing a photo shoot over at Camp Hale, what I would have done is I would have drugged the president through Colorado Springs, and I would have showed him how important that is to Colorado Springs' economy, how important it is to save over $1 billion by leaving it here, how important it is for our residents of Colorado to stay here in Colorado.
And
that's what I would have done.
A follow-up on that, how do you know that the bully pulpit is effective?
Well, I know what's not effective, and that's talking about it. And we've been talking about it, and we've been talking about it, and we haven't got anything done. Michael Bennet doesn't get results. You can see one bill, 13 years.
I don't even.
98%.
98%
of the time, you have voted with Biden.
Right.
If you would have held up just one of those votes, we would have Space Command here.
Let me tell you something. First, the president you voted for, that corrupt person that made that horrible political decision that you voted for twice, you didn't rescind your support for him after he took Space Command away from Colorado, not till 3 weeks before an election. Let me just talk a little bit about the results. $60 billion in this infrastructure bill for broadband, the money that is today being spent on the west slope of Colorado and the eastern plains of Colorado as a result of that broadband bill, that's me. The billions of dollars that's going to forestry to protect our watersheds and make sure that our farmers and ranchers downstream from those have the benefit of that, that's me. The $100 million that's being spent on Floyd Hill to take that pain point away from my city, maybe you guys will be able to get a piece of that action. We're veering away from
Space Command now.
Joe, these are results.
One vote. All you had to do was hold up one vote.
I'm going to give you guys are talking, you're looking toward each other. Let's do the question thing again. Mr. O'Day, a question for Mr. Bennet.
Mr. Bennet.
You can call me Michael.
Certainly. You have championed a law that would make all Congress senators put their funds into a blind trust. And yet, your funds are not in a blind trust. In fact, your investment portfolio made an investment that happened to make money on the collapse of the Puerto Rican economy. Can you explain that?
Sure, and you might want to listen or take some notes on this, because you're worth $80 million, and you may want to know this if you get to the Senate. The reason it's not a blind trust is that every year we are required to publicly disclose our investments. That is the law of the Senate, and so I publicly disclose my investments every year as a result of that. I am one of the very few members of Congress that has my investments in a trust that's not administered by me. I don't make the investment decisions. I don't know what's in there until that public report comes out once a year, and I have absolutely no visibility into the investments that the funds themselves are making. So the reason why I support the Stock Act is because I don't think I should be one of the only people in Congress that does that. I think everybody in Congress should have a trust like that for their investments, because I think it creates an appearance of a conflict of interest sometimes when people might buy and sell stocks, as we've seen with the senators from Georgia who lost last time. That's what I think we should avoid.
And Mr. Bennet, your question back to Mr. O'Day.
My question back to Mr. O'Day. Joe, after you know that your assertion that I've only passed one bill in the time that I've been in the Senate, you've said it over and over again. It's been fact-checked as false over and over again.
It's not false.
You're running a TV ad
It's not false.
saying it over and over again.
You passed
Why
one standalone bill.
Let him ask the question.
Why do you keep, tell me what that means to you.
Well, it just goes to your effectiveness. You're
No, but you've been,
ineffective. You're ineffective.
Let's hear an answer.
I gave you the answer. You're ineffective.
Okay,
Look,
but you're a liar,
we've lost
Joe. You're a liar, Joe.
Yeah.
You're a liar, Joe.
That's not true.
You're lying
I'm
about
telling
my
the
record.
truth. I'm telling the truth. You didn't
but
get Space Command.
You're not telling
You've
the
let BLM leave Grand Junction.
That's not true, Joe.
You helped your president with a war on energy.
That's
which
not
is,
true, Joe.
Yes, it is.
That's
it's
not
all
true,
true.
Joe.
You stood right by him 98% of the time.
I think we've
No, you might want to check your stocks.
The
Because
Q&A stays
if
my
you're
favorite part of this debate. Thank you very much, both of you.
You guys want to talk about water?
Yes.
Luigi's got a question.
Thank you. Thank you. When the federal government said the states that rely on water from the Colorado River must come up with a plan to cut between 2 and 4 million acre-feet of water, our state's response was, in effect, it's not a problem. The lower basin states need to do all of that cutting. Mr. O'Day, do you agree with that position? And if yes, how then exactly will you compel the states to come to the negotiating table?
Well, I think the part that's really disingenuous is the compact is based on a fictitious amount of water. And so far, Colorado has done a phenomenal job working between both agriculture and the metro over here, where a lot of the water is pushed from the western slope here to Fort Collins and on down Pueblo all the way. We've done a great job of working hard to make sure that we conserve as much water as we can. And we're at the reason that we've said, hey, we can't do anymore is because we can't do anymore. There's a few things that might tweak that by a few acre feet, but not in an area that can actually make a difference. California needs to step up and do more. They're doing absolutely nothing. What I have advocated for, they've got the Pacific Ocean right there that they can draw from, and desalinization could help to solve a lot of issues for all of us here in Colorado and the other states.
Thank you. Mr. Bennet, the same question, sir.
I literally agree with almost every word that Joe O'Day just said.
That's it then.
Touchdown. Touchdown.
I don't have to say anything else. I mean, I think he answered it extremely well.
A quick follow-up question.
No, but I will use my time to demonstrate my effectiveness to Joe O'Day, because in the Inflation Reduction Act, which a bill that he opposed, we were able to lead a negotiation. I was able to lead a negotiation to get $4 billion put in that bill to be able to begin to invest to find real durable water savings, hopefully most of that, Joe, as you said, from the lower basin. And I led that negotiation with the senators from Nevada, New Mexico, California. And I said to my colleagues, bipartisan colleagues, that we needed to make sure that everybody was going to have the benefit of that, whether they were Republicans or Democrats, and that's what I believe.
That's one of the liveliest hours of conversation we've had in some time. It's time for closing statements, as determined by a coin toss, 2 minutes apiece. Mr. Bennet, you'll go first.
Thank you very much. Well, thanks for having me, Joe. Thank you for the debate. I really appreciate it. I know he's going to attack me for being a rubber stamp of Joe Biden. I know he's going to attack me for voting with him 98% of the time. I know he's going to say I'm terribly ineffective. I hope that tonight you've heard that none of that is true. And I would like very much your support for the Senate. I believe very strongly that I don't have a timer here.
It'll start at 1 minute.
Okay,
you have
thank
2 minutes, sir.
That our democracy is very fragile, that our democracy is at risk, that we have had an economy for 50 years that's benefited people at the very top like Joe O'Day and has not benefited working people. And I think when people lose a sense of opportunity, that's when candidates like the one Joe O'Day supported twice show up and say, I alone can fix it. We don't need a democracy. We don't need the rule of law. We should expect our public sector and our private sector to be hopelessly corrupt, as it was when Donald Trump took Space Command away from Colorado. My mom and her parents came to this country after they survived the Holocaust in Warsaw. They were Polish Jews who finally got to the United States, the only place in the world where they thought they could rebuild their shattered lives, and they did. They were able to do it. I've never met anybody with stronger accents than my grandparents had, and they were the greatest patriots I've ever known, not because they thought our country was perfect, but because they thought we could fix our imperfections and they could help us fix our imperfections. And I believe we can do that. We can address the headwinds of a healthcare system that doesn't work well enough for too many Americans, of an education system that doesn't work well enough for too many Americans, of energy policy that has left this country less secure than it should be. But more important than all of that, we have to create an economy in this country again that when it grows for everybody, not just the people at the very top. That's what I will do for you if I go back to Washington, D.C. I think Joe has kind of the opposite view of the work ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Bennet. Mr. O'Day, 2 minutes.
Well, first off, I want to thank CSU for hosting us today. Mr. Bennet, thanks for joining me.
Joe.
I appreciate it. This is a special place. I'm a fourth-generation Coloradan. I grew up southeast Denver, adopted at birth by a cop and a stay-at-home mom. Got in a little trouble in junior high school. Got moved to an all-boys Catholic school where I got a little bit of discipline and a dishwashing job to pay for it. From there, I went through the carpenter's apprenticeship program, on up, chased my wife on up to this beautiful school, CSU, where I got most of my construction management degree. I've been running a business for the past 35 years that employs 300 Coloradans, and I've done a good job for them. I've made sure that I provided good opportunity. I've got a couple partners that started with us with nothing, and they're now full-blown partners, making a lot of money and living their American dream. This election is a referendum on Joe Biden and his economy and Michael Bennet's rubber stamp. He's helped him all the way along the way. 1 in 13 bills, we've talked about that enough, I'm tired of it. You've been a rubber stamp for your party. On inflation, Michael Bennet was right there. On crime, Michael Bennett's been right there. On an open border, Michael Bennett's blessed it. On war on energy, Michael Bennet has been right there. On the price of diesel, gas, all-time highs, working Americans can't take that. We can't have an energy policy that straps working Americans, and that's what we have right now, and it's been blessed by Michael Bennet. We can do more. I love this country. This country means a lot to me. My wife and I grew up, and we were able to live our American dream. I want to make sure every American has that same opportunity. A vote for me, vote for a contractor, that's a vote for change. I hope to earn your support. Thank you very much.
Mr. O'Day, thank you. I invite the audience to join us in showing our appreciation to Senator Michael Bennet and Joe O'Day for tonight's debate. Thank you to our gracious hosts here at Colorado State University here in Fort Collins, for our whole team at 9 News, and our partners around the state. Good night.